Soire Kasaranina Makai Sesiki. Welcome, Saira Kasaranina Namakai Kesi. I have such a special guest with me today, and I'm so grateful that you're going to hear this amazing conversation and the wisdom of this phenomenal woman. So, I have with me Lindsy Rilinger. She's a mental therapist and specializes in eating disorders. So, this is what the theme of this month is in the podcast about self sabotaging patterns, specifically in anorexia and bulimia. And she also helps others to help connect their mind and their body. So I'm so excited that you're here. So grateful. Thank you. Welcome, Lindsay.
Of course. Thank you for having me and holding the space. I'm, yeah, so excited for this
Mhm.
conversation also. Very
Yay.
much
So let's begin with a little bit of breath. So I invite you to close your eyes so that feels safe for you. If not, you can just gaze gently in front of you. Let's take a deep inhale through the nose and exhale in through the mouth, letting it go. Inhaling through the nose and exhaling, dropping back into your body. And now this time, just inhale and exhale through the nose. But as you're inhaling, just bring the energy into your heart space. And as you exhaling, drop it into your womb space. Connecting it with yourself, being really present for this transmission. And as you're breathing and you're dropping back in into your body, having the intention that anything that is meant to resonate with you, anything that you're meant to hear for the greatest good of you will be received with an open heart and an open mind. Beautiful. Let's do it one more time. Inhaling through the heart. And as you exhale, dropping down into your womb. And staying in that space of surrender and the space of your own presence, knowing how worthy you are of just being present with yourself. And what a gift that is for all of us to witness that and to feel that as well. May you receive what you're meant to receive. And beginning to invite movement in your body. Feel free to stretch, to crack, however that is for you. And whenever you're ready, opening up your eyes. Ooh, I love that. I feel like it's like, yeah, we're here. Okay.
love it. Yeah, I mean, part of my training, one of I guess you'd say my teachers, she calls it landing. But whenever we arrive in a session in a supervision somewhere, like, yeah, can we just land? Can we just actually realize what it's like to be in this body, in this space, in this connection with you and
Yes.
I? Because so often we don't take that time to like really land.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And thank you for saying that because it's so important. There's especially in this side of the world, we're like constantly so busy, and it's like so important to be like, okay, what are we doing now? Here, let's concentrate our energy here and in this so they can just flow. So,
Mhm.
yes.
Exactly.
So, Lindsay, oh my goodness, thank you one more time for being here. And I'm so excited to hear your wisdom about this because, as I was sharing with you, this month in the podcast is about the self-sabotaging patterns. And for me, one of the biggest ones have been eating disorders, especially like bulimia and anorexia, like very, very deep. And I know, some sisters I've talked to as well that also still have this tendencies of doing that, right? And it's so challenging. It's so challenging, at least for me in my story, was like super challenging to get to the root of why I was experiencing that and have the courage to sit with all of that. And so I think it's so important for the listeners also to hear your wisdom and also what you share with others and what you're serving because it's so crucial nowadays really to like have somebody like you with all the experience to hold space for somebody that is experiencing that in their lives.
Mhm. Yeah, and speaking to that, I mean, that's part of why I was called to this to specialize in eating disorders. When I first started out in the mental health therapy world, I did not think I was gonna end up in this world. But yeah, the more I got into it, like, just kept being called here because I have my own recovery story from, yeah,
Mm.
bulimia restriction, so purging behaviors, restriction behaviors, lots of over-exercising too, and so I just remember when I found my therapist and she had shared that she also had this experience. There's
Mm.
just that instant wall of shame. Who
Yeah.
comes because there's shame in it, and especially speaking, at least this was my experience and a lot of other people that I talk to and work with, especially around bulimia and like purging behaviors, is we have the messy eating disorder. You know,
Mm.
it's there's a lot of shame there with that. And so anyways, just to have that be gone helped my healing so much more and helped me trust her. And so to be able to come on the other side and be able to hold that space for people is so lovely. I
Yeah.
do.
Whoa. And at the same time, like whenever we hear somebody else's story, right? Especially when we're going to, I mean, we see this person as like a teacher in a way, right? And then like the walls drop. It's like, hey, I've been there too. Like this has helped me. And it's also a reminder or also the mirror aspect, right? Like, oh, I can also reach that level too, I can recover as well. So it's so phenomenal. And at the same time, I actually think that it helps to connect with the other person too that is receiving the therapy of the session to like
Mhm.
see, it's like, oh, like I can relate to you, you can relate to me, and you know how that felt like in you, and you can guide me through those processes too.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly.
So
So
good.
so great in my
Yeah.
work, and I'm sure you experience that with the one-on-one work that you get to do with people.
Yeah, yeah, and and I think as women too, and like I just remember like years back and it might sound so crazy, but I had this awareness like, holy moly, all these models, right? This is what we see. This is what we perceive as beauty, how we're supposed to look like. And they are just models, and we don't even know, that's not like quote unquote the real women, right? And so then I was like, "Ah, how many times have we been brainwashed, like watching TV or all these things and saying this is what it looks like beauty, and if you're not here, then you're not beautiful." And it's like, wow, no wonder why there's so many of us, and not just women, right? I mean, men also experience this. They suffer like that because they perceive this, like society tell us, like this is the real woman, this is the real man. So if you don't fit in this category, then you're like, "Pff, you're out of here, you're not good enough."
Exactly. I feel like as women, again, all people, but especially women, because we know that our bodies can get sexualized very much so. And yeah, on this display, we are taught to only have a visual relationship with our body. It is always, okay, what do we look like? Where am I big? Where am I curvy? Where this da da da. And so that's the only way we even know how to connect to our body because it's the only way that's
Mhm.
shown to us. And so much also of what are fed is to disconnect from anything internal. It's
Mhm.
diet culture, that's not hunger, you just need a drink of water, or hey, if you're sleepy, just go get coffee. Like our culture reinforces all these little and big ways of anything internal, ignore and just come back to a visual relationship. And so that's certainly a piece of the work I feel for anybody with an eating disorder is to
Mhm.
really shift the priorities where my visual relationship used to be way up here, and it's really not a priority for me anymore, other than look in the mirror and make sure my underwear's not hanging out or something. Like, but then to shift up that, yeah, internal relationship, the relationship with me, with what my body holds really inside.
Yes, that is so wow. I just like, ooh, I had to sit with that as you were sharing. I was like, bling, bling, bling. Yes, this is so important, because Wow, that was my story for sure, like especially I laughed internally because prior of coming to the podcast with you, I was feeling hungry, right? And I thought about this like, oh, drink some water. I'm like, no, I'm hungry. I'm gonna have a little snack.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, and like years ago, I mean, that wouldn't I would have been like, I'm just gonna drink water, because otherwise the stories that get created in the mind, right? I will get fat if I eat this, and I mean, this body that's is so wonderful. It does so many miracles for us, and it's a way. I love how you said like going internally to get back into that relationship of the body, not just how it looks like, but how it feels like, right? And I'm actually really curious to know how. Wait, before I go into this, I really want to say Lindsay is a badass. I'm honestly, because she also takes my yoga classes and she kicks butt. I mean, and to see that, to hear, because like you look really great physically. Somebody looks at you is like, dang, this girl is awesome, right? And of course, they don't know the story that happened for you to get to that position with your body, right? So this is why I really want to like say that. I mean, for people that don't really know you and are listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, that like what a great phenomenal woman you are, right? Not just like physically, because I see your strength in class, but also you've had this inner power within yourself to go through all those stages of healing, to be able to hold space for others, just like somebody else held space for you through the healing journey of eating disorders. So I want to honor that in you.
Well, and thank you. I do very much so appreciate that. And I've got to throw it right back at you and say, like, you in your classes, you are able to hold that space for me. Yeah, not
Mm.
just physically, but there's been times where you've recognized emotion coming up, or, I've had to say no, and you like honor that. And so, yeah, I
Mm.
appreciate that in you as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So, okay, going back into what I wanted to ask. How long did you have the eating disorders? How long was your process of being with that prior of actually going through the deep healing journey aspect of it?
And certainly a complicated question as it evolves so much. So I would say always growing up, I felt so uncomfortable in my body. So that piece was always there where I felt uncomfortable, awkward, didn't like my body, especially once starting to hit those teen years, early teen years, puberty. Like I didn't like any of it. I did gymnastics, so like we're running around in a leotard, and I remember my friends were like, it's time for you to start wearing a bra, Lindsay, like as I developed. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, fought it. I just didn't want my body to change. But yeah, so that's where it really started going into more of that, like, oh, wait, do I have a fat body? This, that, so much fear of the changing body. And
Mm.
then, yeah, I'd say was in a unintentionally restrictive. I say unintentionally because what I've come to realize is there's a lot of sensory stuff for me involved in my eating disorder. So was always a picky eater and such. And I think that then as I got in adolescence evolved into, okay, I'm not going to eat. And then whenever I quit gymnastics and started drinking way more in high school, all of that became more on like the bingey side of things, and with drinking and with food. And so that was not feeling good, and used to call myself lots of names and
Mm.
definitely not take care of myself. Then that evolved into still hating my body, but I'd say food was okay, the relationship for several years. And then purging started as I got out of high school, kind of randomly. And then it really picked up for me toward the end of college years, to where
Mm.
that's when the over exercising became very excessive, would miss family events, like wouldn't go out. The purging was happening regularly, lots of restriction and then binging and then purging. So that cycle happening a lot and felt as though I had to work off everything. So when I really stepped into the recovery space, like full on, I'm gonna do this, I was 24, 23, 23. Yeah. 23 or 24. I can't even remember now. So,
Wow.
anyways, I'd say a good decade of that back and forth kind of shape shifting for me.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That's a long time, right? To like, especially, I mean, it takes so much energy to it takes so much energy to be into like, do I eat this? Do I not eat this? And like purging. I mean, I don't know how the experience was with you, but I mean, I remember like those deep moments of purging that I felt like I didn't want to do it, but there was something else controlling me to do it. And just like the fight of that and all that energy is like, ah, so much. So it's again, it's so great to like hear that part of your story and know that you've recovered and now you hold space for others in that kind of way. Which again, is also a mirror aspect for somebody else that is listening to know that like, hey, this is doable, right? With the right support system, then you can also recover and experience a healthy relationship with your body, right?
Hmm. Yes, it is. It is possible, and it is one step, one day at a time. And it is slow because it's learning to build trust with yourself. And just as it takes time to build trust with someone else, it's going to take us a while to build trust with ourselves. But oh my gosh, once you get it, it is the most empowering space to be in.
Yes, I know. I love it so much. So I want to go back into what you were saying. It's a slow process and you're learning to trust yourself, right? So just like in any other relationship. So can you walk us through like little tips that people can do in this process? Because I mean, I found that the beginning part of it, it's very challenging, right? So you are committed to something that is feels super scary because all quote unquote all of you've known is like, okay, like self-sabotaging yourself with like thought things, with actions, etc. And so then deciding that, which is a big commitment and at the same time a big movement towards self-love, then it can feel like I don't even know what to do. Like, what do you mean? What is it that I can do, and how can I be gentle with myself and slow in this process?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, first of all, like you said, being gentle, being slow, as you commit to this, knowing this does not happen overnight. And you've got to be willing to try to bring some compassion in for yourself because I always talk to clients too. It's like once you start the work, you'll get to a point where just what you were saying with the purging, where it's like, okay, I know I don't want to do this. I realize now what I'm doing, but then we still do it anyways. And that can be such a frustrating part, but know that that is a necessary part of the change process, is simply the awareness before we are able to see behavior change. And I think a big thing with eating disorders, and honestly, all self sabotaging behaviors, is we we have to make, in a sense, make friends or make peace with these behaviors, meaning, how is this serving me? Because all of this happens on a subconscious level where we're not totally aware of it just yet. These behaviors develop from that place. And so we do have to be willing to acknowledge, even though I feel like I hate that I do this behavior, maybe it is serving some type of purpose for me and I'm getting
Mm.
something out of it. And so being willing to dig into that and figure out what needs are being met here by this behavior. Yeah, maybe in a maladaptive way, but still something's being met, because once we figure that out, that's when you can then slowly start to introduce other ways or just experiment with other ways to meet that need.
Mm.
I feel like that's necessary because if we don't do that, we're just going to try to stop the behavior and then nothing's meeting that need. So, of course, we're going to come right back to that behavior.
Mhm. Wow, yeah. Whoa. That's one of the things like, dang, yes, that's so true, right? For
Mhm,
like any kind of situation in life too, when you are taking something out, something must fill that void, right? And
mhm,
so it's so important to really know that. And goodness, I just keep thinking I'm so grateful we're having this conversation right now. It's super helpful, super helpful. And I think, at least for me, I mean, this part of remembering how long I've been in that process, how long I've done those acts, right? Or non-acts, like not eating, for example, right? And to know, like you were saying, this is not gonna change over time, right? If I've had that story of bulimic and anorexia for 20 years, it's not like I'm gonna wake up the next day and be like, "Whoa," like I don't have it anymore, right? So it's gonna be a slow process of undoing what I have been doing. And I love the fact of having sticky notes around. This is what has helped me in my journey. So I can see I'm a very visual person with colors too. Actually, it can't just be black and white. I get bored by that. So I have to put colors around and sticky notes to like remind me constantly of something, right? That I want to truly feel in me and believe. So that has helped me a lot to see, like I'm beautiful or I love my body or whatever, right?
mhm,
And I think another really important aspect of this is support. And at least for me, I was highly afraid of asking support because first of all, I didn't even know what support I needed.
mhm,
And I was so afraid to accept what I was doing to myself.
mhm,
So how can one maneuver through that space to actually get the support that they need?
mhm. I, yeah, first of all, I want to acknowledge it is fucking terrifying to seek support the first step, especially if it's something we have been living with in secrecy for so long. But there has to be that acknowledgement that shame grows in secrecy. And so,
Mm,
the more we keep something hidden, the more we're growing that shame around it. And then we feel that we have to keep it hidden even more. And, you spoke to it earlier, healing really does come from connection. We are wired for connection as human beings. And we've got the mirror neurons. We know that it impacts our longevity in life. So many facts that we have and scientific studies that support how important connection is. So, when we can show up with someone with this big vulnerability, this big piece, like secret that we have, that first step can be so healing. And so whether that is sharing, seeking out a therapist and sharing with them, seeking out a dietitian who is trained in eating disorders. Don't just go to any random one because sometimes they can make
mm.
things worse. You gotta find one who knows eating disorders. And or just sharing with any friend that you have, any family member. And for some people, sharing with someone close feels better. Other people, I'm going to share with this like random person so then I can run away with it a little. And that's okay.
Mm,
But just to be able to share and even have a moment of like, wait a minute, I shared this. No one's running away. No one's, making calls to lock me up. No one's shaming me. That can be such an important first step that, okay, maybe this isn't the worst possible thing in the world.
right, because we have this tendency of creating this story that is like, oh my gosh, it's gonna go super horrible, and what they're gonna think of me, and like the whole deal, right?
Mhm,
And I love how you said, you know, to seek also with a dietitian, right, that is trained in eating disorders, because I had that. I didn't go to one that was trained with eating disorders, and it made everything more complicated in me because it was like highly uncomfortable. And I mean, I didn't even I didn't even think about the help I needed, right? It was like my ex-husband at the time. So I reached a moment when I was like 99 or 98 pounds. And of course, in my head, I was still seeing myself as like fat. And so that's when he said, hey, like I looked up about this dietitian, which I'm so grateful for him. He helped me a lot and supported me in the journey. But then she just showed me my levels and was like, you need to gain weight. And I'm like the worst thing that you can tell me right now,
Well,
because I already feel that I'm super freaking fat. And all of a sudden you're like, you're so skinny, you need to gain weight. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do what you're telling me to, right? I'm gonna start eating more nuts because that's what she told me and a bunch of different things. And then I gained like pretty quickly, like maybe like 2 or 3 pounds. That in the scheme of things is nothing, especially when you're like 99 pounds. But like in the scheme of like the whole thing that was happening in me, it's like,
right. In an eating
holy
disorder, that
shit.
feels
Yeah.
huge.
That
Yes.
was so scary. I was like, no way, I'm not gonna follow this. And I didn't go back into like purging and things, but like I was internally, I was shaking, I was just like, this is too much, this 3 pounds, and like the whole thing that happens in the head, right? Because 3 pounds is like feels like 50,000 pounds. And it was like beyond scary to be in that position of like, well, I reached out for help and I went somewhere and now like, I follow advice, but now I feel even worse. So like, what do I do now? It's so
Mm,
scary.
exactly. So yeah, definitely important if you are seeking that professional help, make sure someone is familiar with eating disorders because yeah, they are a specialty. They are not everybody can just treat them because saying just eat is not going to be helpful or just don't purge. That's not going to work. So you gotta have someone who knows the route.
Yes, for sure, for sure. I'm interested in know more about your wisdom and the healing journey of this, because I mean, I have my experience of doing everything with energy. I
Hmm.
mean, sure, I went like I was sharing, right, to like some kind of seeking help outside of me. But then for me, it didn't work, and it might be because I was still ashamed of it and I didn't know how to speak about it or how to seek for help, really. So knowing that I was very good with energy, then I just sat with all my shit, honestly. And I went inwards and it was super uncomfortable. I mean, there were many times that I had to like get like feedback from my partner, right? To just be like, hey, you don't look fat. You look really beautiful right now. But still inside I wouldn't believe it. But anyways, like I know that not a lot of people can actually sit with that alone and go through that healing journey by themselves, right? And so, how can one approach that from your perspective and your wisdom, right, in your field, rather than just sitting with it, because it's not for everybody to sit with that.
Well, that's a lot. Like that, yeah, to sit with our stuff requires a big ability to be able to self-regulate. And I know that's a huge piece of my work is teaching people about the nervous system and how am I able to regulate. And whenever I say regulate, if we think of the nervous system, it's like a smoke detector. So the nervous system is that primal part of our physiology that tries to detect threat. And so just like a smoke alarm, sometimes it goes off when it's an actual fire and yay, it kept us safe. Other times we burnt popcorn and we just need to go push the button. So our nervous system will do that a lot where sometimes yes, there's a real threat, other times there's not. And so our job as humans is to go reset our nervous system once we realize, hey, there's not an actual threat happening. Can I find a little bit of safety? And that this idea of safety can be really new to people and really foreign. And so, yet again, it's important to find someone who can help you find safety because if we don't know how to find safety on our own, the best way is to do it through co regulation rather than self regulation. So, finding someone who has an ability to self-regulate, again, whether that be someone in your life or finding a professional to hold space for you to try to establish that safety. And kind of going on a tangent, but I think is important. A big thing that I see with eating disorders is this desire. So, first of all, eating disorders serve a lot of purposes. They're not always simply about, I need to have a thin body. There's so many things, even if that's the story that's created. But a thin body is safer in our society because our society, it values thin bodies and it praises. And there's so much stigma on someone who is in a larger body or someone who's in a fat body. And so just acknowledging that that is an unfortunate and awful thing with our society that I wish would change, and we're slowly working on it, but it's also the truth that we're in. And so a piece of that is doing some internal work with your own fat phobia, because a fat body can be incredibly healthy. The goal is to take care of ourselves. You cannot determine health by your size. But because we live in this society, we tend to associate a thinner body is going to be safer. I'm going to be more connected. People will like me. I'm not going to be judged, all these things. So, seeing how that is often one of these purposes that our eating disorder serves is, if I'm dysregulated, if my nervous system says I'm not okay, ooh, if I shrink my body, maybe I'll be safe then. Maybe, I'll be safe in this society. So, again, challenging a lot of that mental space, but also finding safety in the body. So, if that makes sense. I know I kind of went on a tangent
No,
there.
I was absorbing all that wisdom. I'm like, yes. And I love what you said that, a fat body can also be a healthy body because, I mean, like you said, we've been um somewhat of like trained or conditioned that a skinny body is like the perfect deal, right? So then even some of us can become just say really crappy things about somebody that is in a bigger body, right? And of course, I mean, I have that experience as a kid. I was like the fat one of the family, and it did not feel very good to like hear all these things from all around, even family included. And of course, that's like what took me deeper into like, oh, I must shrink the body to be okay in this world, for example. But this whole thing about safety is like highly important, and I don't really believe that it's just in this particular topic, but just in general in life, like feeling safety like in your home with your partner, at work, and like whatever it is the where you are, right? Because again, it's all about the nervous system, and then when the nervous system is actually like balance, you're super present, and I think that for me at least, that's when you can access deep levels of consciousness because you're not like all tense up. Everything in you is like super relaxed and you can just be and flow. What I mean by that, is feel at peace, feel at ease, and at the same time, accepting and loving yourself, which is one step at a time, right? Especially somebody is recovering from eating disorders. Like you said, like, we've been saying that it's not something that just happens like this. It's like a slow process. And in my experience, it also was more of training myself.
Mm.
It's something just like in like a yoga practice, right? It's not like the first day you're gonna get an arm balance down, right? Like you're learning to like balance your whole body on your hands when we're normally balancing our bodies in our feet, right? So it just takes like this like little amount, which also involves trust, right? Like trusting yourself and then knowing that you can reach that level if you just train yourself a little bit different than how you've been doing before. And also, especially in a yoga practice, right, with like teachers that have been in that journey too and then know how that felt like in themselves, right, which is very similar with this, helping somebody like you, like yourself, right, like you have the experience of that and you have the wisdom and you've studied how to help others to regulate their nervous system. and find that mind and body connection. So you will be like the teacher in in this topic, right? And when somebody is like so vulnerable and coming out, is so important for you to also have that safe space, right? Because otherwise, like, how are they going to open up to you? How are they going to like say all these things, right? They will just be in the little like cocoon.
For sure, for sure. Because, yeah, like you said, our nervous system, if we're not regulated, we are just kind of in that antsy. So if someone's trying to share this vulnerability and I'm there like, okay, come on, let's spit it out, like not gonna be helpful there. And what you said too about little bit like retraining yourself, absolutely. I feel like we tend to have this idea that with mental health, we're supposed to just tell me how to think and then I should be able to do it right away. But no, our brain is a muscle and it's the most complex muscle. So we do have to get a lot of practice with it, just as we do with any type of new skill. And so, whether it be the like sitting with your shit, like you were talking about, or the safety, if you are not familiar with either one of those, you dip your toes in, so it literally is, if we're looking for safety, okay, can I take 3 deep breaths and just focus on my breath? And we start there, and you do that for 2 months, and then you can take 5 breaths, and
Mhm.
then you're able to do it at home and you can do it in your office. Like, it slowly builds your capacity for safety. And then same thing when it comes to sitting with your shit. I at first was talking about you got to figure out what purpose the eating disorder is serving or those behaviors are serving. So sometimes even just journaling and being like, okay, that served me, just that acknowledgement. That's as much shit as we can deal with, and that's fine. And so eventually you'll sit with that long enough that one day you'll be able to say, okay, maybe maybe I don't do this in this way. And you're able to hold off acting on one of those behaviors. If it's purging, hold off for a little while. That starts to build tolerance. If it's, some grief that you have to move through, okay, I can start to feel it and maybe it bubbles, but then I got to shut it down a little. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So, and again, coming back to what we keep saying, trusting yourself that the more you do it, the more capacity you are going to have for these things.
For sure. And what I keep seeing is, like behind the scenes in the energetics, the moment that you have committed that you'll recover from this and you're like fully committed, right? It's not like I'm like, oh, I think I'm committed. I'm like, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm doing this. uh Energetically speaking, your higher self like is guiding you, and like you have like so much support from like all realms, and so much support also from like your ancestors too. They're holding space for you, because everything in life, in my experience too, and working with energy, wants like you to be and express yourself how you desire to express yourself. And a lot of times we don't know, right? And we're moving through this like yucky things in life and trying to figure out how do I move out of this space, but without pushing things aside, just kind of like moving through the mud and moving through the water, and then finding me, right? Finding myself. And it's so important. And I love how you said about journaling, right? And knowing your boundaries, right? You don't need to push yourself, because if your nervous system and your whole being is already like, oh shit, and then you push it even more, then that's going to activate even more all these tendencies, right? So we want to go like little by little. And if it's something so scary, maybe for you, that's not the thing to start with, right? I mean, I remember like this, when I was doing this whole thing about going just to see somebody else, they gave me this book and they said like, try this out. And I just remember looking at this book and I'm like, I don't want to try this out, but I'm okay. The first exercise, no joke, the first exercise was looking at yourself in the mirror. It's like, look at yourself in your mirror and just be there. I
Yeah.
remember that I was just like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then I did it and I couldn't. It was like so scary to just like look at me. I'm like, no way. I mean, I put the book aside because it made me cry so deeply. It was totally scary to do that. And I stopped seeking for that kind of help, and then I went a different route because it was too much for me, right? So like we don't want to get to that point, right? We want to do like things slow, gently. I like to think like, if you have a child, right? Like you're being very gentle with this child, like I will hope most of the time, right? And you're teaching them little by little on your wisdom and based on your experience of life too. And so it's not like the child is going to learn to run since they came out of the womb, right? It's like little tiny steps. And these are like the tiny steps that you are creating in your life as you are doing something to learn to walk on your shoes and be okay with who you are and in your body.
Yes, exactly. And I know that just reminds me, like as you were talking, you asked me earlier about the kind of tips and tricks for people, but one of the things when we're working on truly embodiment, which, yeah, is being in the body with the emotions, with the sensations here and in this space, that obviously feels so uncomfortable and so unsafe for us if we're in any type of difficult relationship with our body. So, a lot of times picking the most neutral part of your body for you. So a lot of times that tends to be like hands or feet for people, but sometimes it's like earlobes even. But like let's say my hands were the one part of my body I feel okay about and isn't super triggering. Okay, I'm going to work on maybe giving myself a hand massage throughout the day and just notice, okay, I can be aware of my body. I can be connected. I can pay attention to what it is like for my left hand to be rubbing, what it is like for my right hand to be rubbed, what each bone feels like really intentional just with my hands. And that builds us up for safety. And then when you feel okay, again, that might be you need that for 5 days, you need that for 5 weeks, you need that for 5 years, whatever rate you go at. But eventually, okay, can I be okay? If I kind of massage my forearms maybe until
Mm.
we just, yeah, slowly, one step at a time, learn to connect, learn to feel our body in a safe way rather than, again, this visual where we just pick it apart and say, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. How does that relate with the mind? So, like you're saying, you help others also with some kind of techniques to like go into the mind and body connection. So, if somebody's starting with their hands, like you were saying, and massaging their hands and connecting with that part of themselves because they don't feel triggered by that, what is that serving in the mind as they're working through that?
Yes. So it's starting to, first of all, let the mind actually receive information from the body. Because as we talked about, we tend to cut off the information that's being received by the body. So, okay, the sensory input that I'm getting, can I listen to the body? And those start to be the thoughts that get associated with this part of the body. Because again, thoughts, just like we get muscle memory, if I don't know, for you, yeah, with yoga, there are certain poses that you don't have to think about. You can just hit versus newer ones. Okay, let me really focus on alignment here. We don't have that muscle memory just yet.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing with thought. We have like thought muscle memory. And when we're used to picking ourselves apart, so let's say it's in the mirror, my stomach, every time I see my stomach or I become aware of it, it's this muscle memory where that triggers you are wrong, this is bad, you need to restrict, da da da. So by starting to do this, it starts to trigger a new muscle memory or like thought memory where, oh, I can be curious. Oh, I can be, again, just safe. I can simply receive and observe this part of the body without automatically going to the judgment and the desire to change it.
Wow. And I think this is such a crucial and such a beautiful little exercise that people can do, right? Especially if they're learning to have their relationship with their body. And again, the like in a way rewiring like your system, right, to self-accept.
Mhm.
And I mean, I love that. It's something super simple, and I think like anybody can do that, right? It's just like, oh, I'm just touching my hands, and that feels really good and safe. Oh, how cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Eh,
So
Yeah.
slowly building safety in the body.
Yeah. What it kept coming up for me was that when you were talking about safety, I mean, I'm such a like inner child at heart, and so like I like needed my unicorn, when I
Mm.
did all these things, right? I mean, I said honestly, like the day that I tapped into the root of like my story of eating disorders. I sat in bed for like 4 or 5 hours doing this, holding my unicorn.
Mm.
So for me, that was like a big like safety situation that I had to do to feel safe in that space, right? I mean, I didn't want anybody else to be around me. I didn't want Derek to be around me. I was like, please, I just need to sit with this. But the one thing that I kept holding it to, mostly my woman, my heart, was my unicorn, because for me, that's safety. And maybe that can help somebody else too, that if it's a little bit challenging of finding that safety in you in that space, if your inner child or just you as a being, like feel safe holding something, because it could be a pillow, for example, right? It doesn't need to be a unicorn, right? But if that feels like somewhat of safetiness, like it could also help somebody else.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like you said, if even our hands aren't okay or we're not ready for that, go outside of yourself. Yeah. Learn to find safety in the world, in the environment. It can be looking at a certain picture, it can be a certain song, yeah, it can be touch, something to hold, it can be your pet. It can be even just being wrapped up and cozy, a certain
Mhm.
smell. So many options. And again, we really can do it in a very simple way. So don't, sometimes people can overcomplicate, oh, I need this big thing to feel safe. Like just noticing like how we shift when we, yeah, notice certain things. And okay, what's the thing in my space that brings me a little bit of calm, a little bit of content, a little bit of safety.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, I have a question for you, because this has been my experience and also the experience of some women that I've helped through this too. My experience with the root of my eating disorders was the connection with my mother and my mother lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to, go back into the memories of what had happened with my mother, right? In order to, and that was where I was talking about releasing the root and coming into the root and sitting with that. And so, in your profession, in the way that you hold space for others, is that normal? Like, is that the tendency, right? That is more the mother wound rather than the father wound or the self wound. I mean, it's definitely self wound, but like, regarding into like mother or father wound.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw me like kind of smirked and chuckled there when you said that because yeah, definitely can be the case. And I'd say, and I do want to just speak to anybody. Eating disorders don't always fall in boxes. Everybody has their own experience. So, if you have a father wound, if there is something else that's it's still valid and it's still real, but we do see a lot of patterns. And I would say especially when it comes to bulimia and like purging behaviors, that specifically can get really attached to the mother wounds. We see that behavior, I would say, more commonly attached than other types of
Mm,
behaviors. It's not to say never, but that
right.
one really strongly does have a mother wound associated.
Wow, yeah. And thank you for answering that. Because I mean, it was, like I said, I don't have my like experience like you do, right? Like I have the experience in the energetics and stuff, and in other things that other sisters do that is also based on energy to rewire like your brain. And then that's also where it came up, for others, like, oh, it's like the mother wound in this tradition. That's where it goes from. So, holy moly.
Mhm.
What I think like this topic it can be explored for like hours, honestly.
For sure. It certainly can. And so I thankful I get to do that with people all day for hours.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
wow, thank you for what you do because it's very important, to I mean, I remember how it felt like for me and how scary it was to start to maneuver and to really commit that I didn't want to have those habits anymore. And to have somebody to listen to me, to have somebody like you to hold space for others and guide them through a space of connecting back with their body like gently because again you have your story and it's so beautiful, so thank you for what you do. It's phenomenal.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to do it and happy that I like going to work and that I enjoy it and
Yeah.
knowing my clients give me so much too. So there's a bit of
Mhm.
self-serving in there too that I get from it. Mm.
For sure, yes. Do you have any advice or any kind of nuggets of wisdom that you would like to share with the ones that feel maybe a little bit of hesitation of just diving into this healing journey to reconnect with their bodies?
Yeah, definitely. I I guess I'm just kind of summing up everything we have said, but take it slow. You know, there can sometimes be hopelessness whenever we talk about how slow it can be, but it does start to add up and you will get momentum and before you know it, oh my gosh, a decade has passed and I've been in a better space and knowing that that is worth it to be in a better space in a few years rather than to be in the same space in a few years. So it's just a willingness to change things, even if you don't know where direction you're going, just a willingness to explore, get curious with yourself. And I mean, kind of coming back to the mother wound, so much of eating disorders is about learning, truly learning to nourish ourselves, not just from that physical standpoint with food, but nourish, yeah, our inner child, nourish our emotional side. And so starting in those type of ways is going to help and always encourage people to, if you're not ready to share your story or go there yet, take in other people's stories that have recovered, like listening to this podcast, going and finding other podcasts. There's many books too that not necessarily memoirs. I will say memoirs aren't always the most helpful because sometimes people are just reliving the deepest part of their eating disorder, and if you're in that space, it's not always
Mm,
helpful. But
mhm.
to there are plenty of books that talk about how to connect to self and how to do some of this work and just start thinking about the body in a very different way. So taking in other people's information first might help you feel more ready to share your information and your story.
Thank you. And I would like to add that surrounding yourself that by people that bring the best in you can also help, right? I mean, in my story, at least, like the moment that I started to surround myself by others that I looked up to, and they will make me feel a little bit more comfortable with myself and happier, then I will just gravitate towards them, right? And we just became like very good friends, holding space for one another too. So I think that's also like very important community, right? Like support system, your support system, not just in the way of like, for example, therapists or anything, but also your friends, your close circle that can hold you there and let you know, hey, you're deeply loved, no matter what it is that you're going through, no matter how you show up, if you show up messy or not, like we still love you and we still see you. I think that's also something really important to have.
For sure.
Yay. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you for having me and oh, thank you for connecting on our stories and sharing this.
Yes, for sure. So, um, is it okay for some people to reach out to you, or would you
Yes.
prefer them to like do through email? Like, what's your preference?
Yeah, probably email. I know I'll send you my email, and I've got a website too, so people can find my information on there if they're curious about, yeah, any supports coming from me.
Awesome.
And
And
I'm
then if
also
you
happy to connect them with other resources too. So
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And if you are in the Lawrence, Kansas area, Lindsay, go see Lindsay.
um,
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so grateful that you actually took the time to listen to this. And I'm sure it helped you so much. Just like me listening to like Lindsay's wisdom is like, yes, so good, so good. And yes, I will put all the information down below if you like to connect with Lindsay or with myself. You just do like a little click, super simple. And before we go, let's just take a couple of deep breaths together to like really sink in all this wonderful information. So one more time, if it feels safe for you, closing up your eyes. Let's take a deep inhale through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, make some sounds. Let's do it one more time. Deep inhale and exhale. And coming back to your normal breathing, just allowing all the information to sink in and to what is it that resonated the most for you? What does it feel really aligned for you to maybe take action or non-action, right? Just to sit more with that, allowing the energies to be present with you and how you feel in your body after listening to this wonderful transmission. Knowing that you're deeply loved, knowing that you're beautiful as you are, and knowing that you're actually creating a massive change in the world just by breathing and by being you. Mm. Taking a deep inhale through the heart space and exhaling, inviting gentle movements in your body, coming back to yourself even more. Feel free to open up your eyes, maybe stretching. Mm. Ah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing all your amazing wisdom. What a pleasure it was to have you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gracias, gracias, gracias. So, bye, and well, I'll see you next time. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Have peace.